This is Hauling Success, a podcast that focuses on operational excellence and logistics, diving into the real-world strategies, tools, and insights that help transportation and trucking companies run smarter, grow stronger, and scale with confidence.
Welcome to Hauling Success. My name's Pam Polyak, and I am joining you today live in studio for the very last time. That is right. I am not shutting down the podcast by any means. We are just moving locations. So after this episode, we are tearing this studio down and relocating next week. So pretty excited about that. We've got a lot of things going on at Polyak as a whole, both trucking, operational, and in consulting. So very blessed with that. But what I am coming to you today to talk about is first quarter 2026 conferences and connections. So I talk a lot about not burning bridges, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I emphasize in life. Transportation as a whole is pretty dang small, meaning you know people and people you don't turn around and burn the bridge so that the communication and the connection is lost, because someone, although it might be a random broker to you, might be somebody who ends up in a high slated slot at a customer that you already haul for. And now you've got that reputation from a previous relationship and a previous situation. So don't burn bridges is 100% what the theme of a lot of today is. But what I want to talk about specifically is what kind of conferences that I have found over the last few years specifically that have been a huge benefit to me. So I'm going to start with what the first part of the year brought in, which for me was Manifest. Manifest is done out in Vegas. It is very, 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 very tech heavy. I've gone the last 2 years. But the first year I went as a trucking company. I went to see what's out there for us as truckers. And if I'm being totally candid, and please don't come for me in the comments, it is not designed for trucking companies. It simply isn't. It is designed in a tech space, warehouse robots, inventory robots, large company type base conference for sure. I would venture to say it's more on the pricey end, meaning it's at the Venetian Hotel. The price of admission is pretty high. The price of the hotels, obviously, you're in Vegas, so that's pretty high. When I went this past year, I went representing Amos TMS, which is obviously a sponsor of the podcast. Love them dearly. Went with them to Manifest, and it was definitely a different vibe when you're coming from a tech angle on things. But from a trucking aspect, nothing hit the spot directly with that. The BCS Broker Carrier Summit spinoff that I met with the people at their happy hour last year when I went. So that would have been 25 when I went. That was probably the highlight of it. And I'll talk about BCS a little bit more in the show. But Manifest, my vote, save the money. It's not really needed. But conference season wise, there's a lot of things that go on. We also have user conferences. I chose this year not to go to any user conferences. Usually 10 Street Connections, if you use them for hiring, they have a user conference. Geotab, Samsara, a bunch of them have different user conferences, different things that they put on. I didn't go to any of those. So not bashing them. I just haven't. Used to go years ago to some of my favorite ones were the PeopleNet conference before they got bought out by Tremble, but we're talking 2015, 16, 17, something like that. Absolutely loved those experiences. Those ones that are very knowledge heavy tend to be the best ones for me. I want to get something out of it. Connections and direct contacts is obviously a huge plus in terms of what I try and get out of when I go to conferences. So Manifest was successful this year from an Amos and a tech standpoint. Not successful last year in terms of trucking. Moving on to MATS. I went to MATS this year. I have never gone before. The main reason why is because it usually falls right smack in the middle of me trying to do spring break, right? It's usually that last or second to last week of March, which falls right during my daughter's spring break. I got lucky this year and kind of made the decision to go because it was right at the beginning of it. So it's that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then I went on spring break with my daughter. But MATS to me was awesome. I know that there was a lot of feedback generally that the educational piece isn't as high. Kind of made me sad because I spoke on stage, which is obviously what I'm there for. But I did find it a little interesting that the only way you could have heard our whole conversation is when there was a when you purchased the VIP package for your ticket, which to me, it wasn't crazy expensive by any means. I would definitely consider doing that again in terms of getting the VIP package. So you got some of those talks. Basically you're able to come in earlier to the showroom, and those talks are typically on the showroom floor. One of the biggest highlights for Matt's was obviously the administration came. Sean Duffy and Derek Bars were both in attendance on Friday, which was the second full day of Matt's. That sent the industry in an uproar in a very positive way. There was a lot of people able to get interviews, have conversations. I unfortunately didn't know that, and I took off and scheduled my flight for noon on Friday. So although I met with some administration people early Friday morning, bottom line is that I missed all the excitement with Duffy and Bars generally in the building. As soon as Chief Derek Bars showed up, it was exactly the time I needed to leave. So I was blessed. I did get to spend some time with Delilah Coleman and her family from the Delilah Act. And that is something that I will cherish greatly and forever. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Matt's, to me, it was informative. If you are an owner operator in single truck, it is an excellent place to get connections in terms of parts, mechanics, system wise connections in that way, in that field. Corporate business, there's not anybody there you're really rubbing elbows with in terms of wanting to get sales from them, right? Brokers really aren't there. Big shippers aren't there. It's very hands on for the 1 to 2 truck operations. You can certainly make connections, look at a bunch. I mean, there's a lot of really nice trucks. So if you're a fan of trucks, that's certainly a place to go. They're chromed out, decked out, beautiful colors, paint jobs. All things I would never be able to afford, I don't think, nor would I likely spend my money on, but they're really awesome to look at for sure. There's 100% a reason why that has been so successful year over year over year. Beautiful location. So I really can't complain. There was a lot of shuttle buses offered in Louisville, which helped get people from the hotel to the conference a lot earlier. So depending on exactly what your goal is, if your goal is sales, that's not the place you're going to find anything. If your goal is to find better parts for the truck, better connections on credit, better lubricants from that end, those are all things 100% that I would do when it comes to Matt's. Again, there's that educational piece. Some of the talks do happen prior to showroom floor opening. So I would consider doing the VIP access to make sure that you can get in front of all those shows before the doors open for the general public. But bring your walking shoes. There is a lot of aisles of communication. There's a lot of aisles of things set up. There's a lot of trucks. So it's a very, very big location. It's definitely a party at times for sure. But I think Matt's is definitely a place I would go back next year to. Love the connections, love the people. And obviously that 1 to 2 truck operations and smaller fleets are certainly in my wheelhouse of communication. So Matt's was a good one for sure. Then I followed suit. After spring break, I ended up going to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about this as a whole, because if I'm being totally honest, Washington, D.C. drained me in a completely different way. I met new people, which was my entire goal of it. I didn't know at the time anybody that was going personally. I originally went through the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association, which each state has their own. So I would encourage each of you to certainly be involved in your Motor Carriers Association. Obviously, there's a monthly annual fee, but there's definitely a lot of things that each state puts on, whether it's driver certificates, awards, safe driving. There's a lot of resources they send you. There's a lot of information they push in terms of laws and changes. So it's a great place to start in terms of where your terminal is and understanding what your state's putting forward and how things in transportation are affecting your state. But I originally made that decision to go. It was a little bit on the pricier end, I didn't have to pay to go there. I had to pay the hotel and the flight, which $600 hotel and Navy, what is it? It's not Navy Pier, Navy something. I don't know. Somebody in the comments tell me what it's, Navy something. But I was there in Washington, D.C., right in the center of everything. Cool location, beautiful city. Absolutely loved that piece of it for sure. We met with the ATA. We went to Congress, Senate, Capitol Hill, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to get it just a little bit more into detail. But in all truthfulness, the politics side of things is very new for me. So I am going to fumble. I am going to screw things up. I have some notes here on some topics that we did talk about and some things that I kind of drew back from it. But this is going to be as candid as real. This is not going to be political. I'm not selling anybody on anything. I'm just teaching you guys what I saw, what I experienced while I was there, and kind of what some of us might have certainly already known, but kind of the takeaways in a positive note. What prior to meeting with the Wisconsin Motor Carrier Group at the ATA office, because we were going on their behalf and kind of coordinated things with them in terms of the meetings. But what I ended up meeting at the United States Department of Transportation building, and I had a wonderful meeting kind of pitching to them this idea of continuing education. I'm a personal believer that we are lacking education in this environment and in this industry right now from the baseline. I think it's very interesting that a soccer referee needs to have their license renewed every year and take a test every year so that they understand the rules and laws, just like most professions, whether you're a doctor, a psychiatrist, a teacher, it doesn't matter. There's accounting, there's so many different industries out there that require ongoing continuing education and proof that you know what you're doing. For those who don't know, as a foster parent, I was required to take 40 hours of training. So I am licensed to be a parent, which sounds crazy because there's plenty of people who obviously aren't. But as a foster parent, you do need a license. You do need those 40 hours of training to get your license and sustain your license and that kind of stuff. To me, it's pretty mind blowing that an industry as geared towards and needing to be as geared towards safety as possible doesn't have any type of continuing education. The closest they come to it is renewing your med card as a driver space. I think it is pretty ridiculous that me, as an MC and a DOT holder, I don't have to take a test. I don't have to show anybody that I know anything. And so I've kind of been advocating for that. To show through. I love the new MODIS system. Obviously, the administration right now is doing a lot of damage into the fraud field of things. I'd make the argument it's not happening fast enough, but they are working quickly. So it's not by them, it's simply the politics of it. I'm going to get into that. And that's where kind of my Washington, D.C. really drained me type mentality is coming from. But the bottom line is that we turned around and went and met with congressmen, congresswomen, senators, representatives, that kind of stuff in the different districts. Specifically, we met with people in Wisconsin. Obviously, we're there representing Wisconsin Motor Carriers. So what I found pretty interesting was actually one call out I found. We met with a representative in Wisconsin, and I'm not going to name names because it's fine. He's all for it. He's Republican. He is very for what we are trying to do in the trucking industry. Turned around and said, guys, there isn't going to be anything I disagree with. Like, whatever you're for. I'm with you on this stuff, but give me your top 3. And those are the ones I want printed out. I want to read them. I want them on my desk, and I will pass those as long as I don't disagree with anything or have any additional questions. I'll get those or work on getting those passed or say yes to having them passed, however that crap works. I have no idea. But I found it interesting that we had probably about a dozen different laws that we were coming in with saying, help us. We want these things passed. I'm going to read the list of different laws just for a knowledge sake and you guys understanding kind of what we're up against. But from a trucking and legislation, we are looking at Truck Parking Safety and Improvement Act, Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. That is the bottom. And if I fumble these a little bit and give very brief, I'm not the professional when it comes to some of these. So I do encourage you guys to do your own research. I'm just giving you some base points as to what some of this stuff is. Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. That's the theft that we're seeing, right? And a lot of this fraud and how it's getting done. So it's combating that organized retail, stage accident fraud, forum accountability and integrity on the roadway, lawsuit abuse, litigation transparency act, Trucker Bathroom Access Act. By the way, the Trucker Bathroom Access Act is not a punishable act. It is not anything that costs financial. It's purely stating that if a driver is going to be at your facility to load or unload, you need to allow them to use their facilities. The fact that that's even up for debate's a little insane, if you ask me, but it is. So take that for what it's worth. The Drive Safe Act, the Modern Clean and Safe Trucks Act, Biodiesel Tax Credit Act, Renewable Natural Gas Act, Retreaded Tire Jobs Supply Chain Security and Sustainability Act, the Non-Domiciled CDL Integrity Act, which is what Delilah's law is, and the Safer Transport Act. So all of those, we went as Wisconsin Motor Carriers, as ATA, to talk to these different legislators, decision makers, that kind of stuff. And I really just found it interesting that even though there were people very for what we are doing and very for the trucker and understanding that, we're like, I only have time for this. And that's exactly how laws get pushed into the back burner. They sit on these sheets of paper that they give out on trying to get these things passed for years. And my mind went poof. It's that idea, like the common person, right? I'm a common everyday person. You know that it can take forever for laws to get passed, and you wonder why. And you're like, if this could get implemented tomorrow, what's going to happen? One of the key things that I learned, and I apologize if I sound stupid to some, but it was knowledge to me, so I want to give it out to you guys, that I had no idea that you pass the law and then you figure out how to implement it. Like, I was asking questions during the briefing on these laws, like, well, wait a minute, what does that look like on our end? Is that something I'm going to have to pay for? Is that more administrative work we're going to have to do? What's the cause and effect on our end? And the answer was, that's not what we're here to do. And that's not how this works. And that to me was very shocking. I guess I didn't know. I simply didn't know that you pass the law, you focus on passing the law, and then there'll be committees formed on how it's implemented, when it's implemented, who it affects, what that looks like. And then there's just separate committees for all of these things. Pretty mind blowing to me, if I'm being totally honest. I simply didn't know that was a thing. And so I felt very defeated a little bit in that moment, for sure, because obviously I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted. But in the exact same notion, I felt like it was just pushing for a law that I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to affect me. I know the basics. I know how it would affect things in economy, but I care so much about that day-to-day effect and what does it look like? Do I need a person just to do this? Do I need a new system to handle this? How is it going to impact? And so that part was pretty discouraging, for sure. I will say, from just a random fact, Capitol Hill itself is a college frat house. I'm just going to sit on that one for a second. It is a college frat house. You walk around the halls of Capitol Hill and the doors are decorated in propaganda and decorated in, I mean, some people are very, very nice about it. It's got like Wisconsin banners or Tennessee banners or different things representing different states. I see that and get that. But there was also several doors, not going to name names, that definitely stuck out in terms of anti this administration, anti this president, that was like, we're back in college? Didn't you all graduate? It felt very high schoolish, very college-ish. Felt kind of disappointing, to be honest. It's like, you're supposed to be professionals. You're supposed to be representing what the people want in terms of safety, in terms of advancements in economy. Like, don't we all have the same goal at the end of the day? Or is it just tit for tat? And that's kind of what I took away from it. I don't want to kind of swayed either one from a political standpoint. Again, I'm not really a political person, but obviously I've got stances and things that I want to see passed and things that I know that we need different within the trucking stance. So that's really the angle that I'm coming from. And it was very unique. One Democratic person, I was encouraged not to request that they pass this bill. And I guess my question was, why? We want the Delilah law to pass. We want the Safe Driver Act to pass. And it was, well, they don't care about that. They're going to care more about the emissions and the global warming and the environmental type stuff. And so you're really wasting your time having those conversations talking about the other acts. I went, truth or dare. I was like, I felt like I got dared to do something. And I took a swing in terms of contacting them and emailing them and sending them a message saying, which I know is fair game. And honestly, I would encourage all of you to do the same. But there is particularly a representative who represents the area that we're from directly, and disappointed to hear that there is not a lot of support in that trucking realm at all. and which it didn't necessarily surprise me, I guess just disappointed. But then to hear that it probably wouldn't even be worth my time to have that conversation, and that's very disappointing because to me all of these acts and these bills that we have on the table right now are designed for safety. They are designed for safety. Like, we are talking about safer roadways. We are talking about safer drivers. We are talking about safer systems. We are talking about enforcing the systems designed to keep us safe. Those are the things that are on the table. Why is that a question? Why is that an issue? Why is that anything? And it just felt very political. And I know that contradicts, obviously, right? It's politics, but when I say that, it was definitely the shit show that everybody believed it would be. Although I loved parts of Washington and the people were nice and the people at the ATA were wonderful and the people within the Wisconsin Motor Carriers and people have done this for years were definitely informative and definitely taught me a lot. It was an experience I will likely never forget. I don't know that I have any ambition to go back and do it again. Uh, but I do see the need. I do see why if we're not contacting our administration and our representatives and our congress people within our own area, that they're likely going to forget about what is important at the bottom level. And I say that for myself, like I'm at the bottom level. They don't, when they hear people talk and they only hear insurance companies and they only hear data and all that stuff, they're talking nuclear verdicts. They're talking big stuff that I know nothing about. My experience is from the avenue of the day to day. What does it look like to me? What does a stolen load do for me? What is the fraud and the needing all these systems to combat the fraud and to verify yourself and verify other trucking companies and that kind of stuff? What does that do? And it's been just very impactful on understanding that nothing's going to happen as quickly as we'd like it to, even though we have an administration that cares. And that is the defeating part. That's the frustrating part. To me, there really shouldn't be much debate on the Drive Safe Act. Why don't, when we have a load go missing and we have theft that occurs, whether it's from double brokering, regular brokering, we were somehow a part of something on pure accident where we're not getting paid for something, somebody brokered a load to us, whatever the case is, there's lots of different ways to be involved in this fraud and theft. And some of it you don't even know for months later until you realize an invoice never got paid. But why aren't we having that conversation? Why can't we combat and enforce the laws that are already in place? Why can't we have the committee of people to say, hey, I need somewhere that I need to call? I mean, I had in 2024, I had 2 stolen loads totaling about $32,000 in cargo that had to come out of my pocket. Insurance didn't pay for that. So what does that mean? And is that number somehow included in these billions of dollars that they talk about in terms of retail and cargo theft? The problem is, I don't think it does. I don't think it does at all. And the reason why is, who did I report it to? Local police laughed, even though I called 3 or 4 different jurisdictions where it got picked up from, where we're located, where the shipper's located, all these different things. You call and you make those phone calls where the carrier claimed that they worked out of. It was just a house in Tennessee. They double brokered it. Any of these calls, I didn't have anybody to help me. And still nobody's helping me. And it's 2 years later. And the fact that one of these bills and these acts on this piece of paper have to do with an enforcement group so that we can have a place to call. We as the trucking industry can have a place to call to say, hey, this happened, so that they can try and make those connections and those rings. And there's great programs and people out there advocating for this stuff. But the fact of the matter is there were people sitting at Capitol Hill who had zero interest in passing it simply because of the Democrat versus Republican. And that is BS. It's just, what? Why are you against it just because of the president? When we're telling you it's a safety concern, we're telling you it is literally costing us thousands upon thousands of dollars in trying to avoid it. If it hits, what that looks like, mitigating it as much as humanly possible, whether you're subscribing to all of these different sites, your Carrier 411, your Highway, your Freight Validate, all these places, your RMIS, Truck Stop, all these things that you're doing to try and mitigate, those are costs to do the fraud that the government needs to step up and protect us to begin with. And there's people that are just going to veto stuff just to veto. And it was very frustrating. And obviously I can go on and talk and rant. It was, but I want to get back on topic for a little bit. But Washington, D.C., beautiful state, wonderful people. I had a lot of wonderful connections, ATA, Wisconsin Motor Carriers, all of that was fantastic. Meeting different congressmen, representatives, senators, that was definitely an experience. Somebody asked me at the end if it was, oh, did you have fun? I don't think fun would have been the word to describe it. Informative, certainly a lot of knowledge. From that end, all it did was cost me, my time in a hotel room and a flight. I would encourage people to do it and try it. See what you can learn from it, see what you can understand. But honestly, most importantly, it kind of got some meat in the bones of when people tell you like, oh, write to your representative, write to your whatever. And I'm like, that's actually true because staffers will read those things. Staffers will read those notes and those messages and trying to understand and push for different things. So I'm 100% for doing the advocacy piece of it, but understand that there is zero or next to zero, I would think, immediate gratification from any of that in a political standpoint. I don't understand how they do it. And wake up every day and grind and move and they went meeting to meeting to meeting. I will tell you that was pretty impressive. It was timed. It was, you have 15 minutes, you have 17 minutes, you have 20 minutes, whatever it was. Things were definitely timed, but it was packed. It was like meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and I understand why one of them was specific and said I only have time for 3. But that's also the disappointing part. So take that for what it's worth. Just my experience, my opinion. Politics are definitely still politics at the end of the day, and it's frustrating to know that the things that we want to have passed and we need to have passed, and we've proven that they will change and alter the industry and hopefully return it back to some of its core values, is just not there anymore. A lot of these bills can focus on establishing more of the trust that's been completely broken in this industry, and it's frustrating to see how bad it's gotten over the last several years in terms of trust and the fact that you just can't trust anybody anymore. But anyway, moving on. So Washington, D.C., I went there, got back, spent about a week in office, and then I went to the Broker Carrier Summit in Kansas City, and that just wrapped up yesterday, but I think this isn't going to air for another week or two. So went to the BCS in Kansas City. Those guys are doing an amazing job there. I absolutely love that. From a small 1 to 10 truck operation, even into the 20-25 truck operation, that is bread and butter. That is the place to find brokers. That is the place to discuss lanes. It is very, very, very network heavy, which is awesome. Definitely designed programs to have you meet people, talk to people, connect with them, shake hands with brokers, shake hands with other trucking companies. Yes, there's some tech that show up and try and sell you what their tech is, which it's understandable. It makes sense, but there's definitely a large amount of positive connections that come from it. There's also a piece in terms of learning that has been huge. There was talks on fraud. There was talks on FMCSA update. There was talks on importance of insurance. I talked on claims and insurance, like when's the right time to notify insurance from a small carrier standpoint, or the things that you're doing to protect, mitigate, that kind of stuff. I had a wonderful conversation with Sam Watts and Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney, on that one. So that was amazing. And then I talked with the wonderful Mark Lukenbill and Robert Bain. We discussed how to implement tech into your business. And we did it from a very small fleet. When is it a good time to get off the Excel sheets? When is it a good time to implement any type of accounting software? What's the best way to arrange tech within the truck, whether it's cameras, ELDs, TMS systems, that kind of stuff. So very not scary. In either scenario, we weren't talking about nuclear verdicts and that kind of scary insurance type talk that I'm sure you've gotten before. So we weren't talking about that stuff. And we also weren't really talking about, yes, AI came up, but we weren't talking about, the robots and the dispatching and we weren't trying to sell you anything from that end. It was simply just what's the baseline? What's a good time to say, hey, I'm doing this by hand or I'm doing this on an Excel sheet. How can I automate some of these systems? And all of those conversations were very well received in terms of education and honoring that. But again, the networking was huge. This will be my second bigger event. I went to a couple of BCS's pop-up events as well. And I can safely say that there has been some strong connections, some freight lanes that have been secured because of that. And just honestly, we start on Monday a dedicated lane that came from this connection just this past week. So that's going to be a huge benefit and something that I will continue to support. I believe the next one is in, I want to say September or October down in Texas. So they do change locations and they do bigger ones biannually. So usually one in this April, May timeframe, and then one in like September, October. I think the one in Texas is the end of October. And I can put up comments, or one of you BCS people, if you're watching, can comment on exactly what the dates are down in Texas for October. Bottom line is, it depends on what you want to get. With all these conferences, there's millions out there, and it depends on what you want to do. But I will say 100% what you get out is equal to what you put in. If you go to these events and you go to these conferences and you just sit on a wall or you just sit there, you're not going to get much out of it. You need to raise your hand, ask the questions, understand what the audience is, what the goal is for you to go. Are you looking for customers? Are you looking for more drivers? What are you looking for? Are you looking for more vendors? Are you looking for a new TMS system? Are you looking for tech? Or, what your goals are? And then be specific about those. A lot of these conferences will put out different agendas. And so before you even sign up, make sure you're looking at those agendas and taking away what is possible. Again, BCS does a fantastic job, in my opinion, one of the better conferences that I go to. And they're very affordable from that end. Whether you're a trucking company, a carrier, they've got different pricing depending on which one you go, which is awesome from that end. But being a trucking company is very affordable for us to go, and I like the mix of locations. There was also, because we were in Kansas City, so there was also a lot of local Kansas City people who may or may not have come to Orlando, and there was a lot of local Orlando that came to the one in October last year. Keeping in mind those connections are a good thing, and I understand that getting out of the truck and going to these conferences would be very difficult. But there's an end game play with it. And that's the last thing I really just want to reinforce to you guys, is that with the connections you're making, and the last episode aired, we did sales, and that meant having those brokers who reach out to you now become your sales approach, right? Understanding that those connections go both ways. It doesn't just have to be them contacting you. It can certainly be you contacting them. And that's exactly what some of these conferences are designed to do, and how to find them from that end. So again, Matt's not so much customer focused, but very driver focused, mechanic focused, back office kind of support. There were a lot of different ELDs, TMS systems that were there, but also parts, maintenance, that kind of stuff that were there at Matt's. So that was good from that angle. The broker carrier conference obviously is that direct connection between carriers and brokers out there, the handshake deals that are getting done. 100% is worth it. I met a lot of people who, actually, I met a broker. I had a conversation with them over breakfast, just, sat at their table, and they said, they've had a brokerage for about a year and haven't moved a single load. And we're trying to get into it and really dive into what it looks like. So there are people with years of experience, and there's people with absolutely zero experience at those events. And that's what makes it special, in my opinion. It really allows people to understand how to tap into some of those connections, understand what it's like to even network, to connect, to have those handshake deals. But again, it's what you put into it. If you stand against a wall, it's likely not going to do a lot. But honestly, if there's ever a time I'm going to one of these and somebody wants to tag along in terms of I've never been to one, simply raise your hand. I'd be happy to kind of show you around and show you what conference life is like. But I'm done for the summer, I believe. I think we're wrapped up for the season in terms of conferences, which is going to be a nice little break for me this summer. But then we'll hit the ball running again by September. More conferences will certainly open up, and have some in fourth quarter. So there is obviously that you're spending a little bit of money. You're taking time out of the truck. You're obviously paying for hotel rooms or that kind of stuff, but you can also try and find some in your area as well. And those connections can definitely thrive in terms of, okay, I met this person at Manifest, this turned into this turned into that. And it really is a smaller community than what it feels like, especially if you're getting out there and doing the sales things. Last podcast we put out, make sure you're posting on LinkedIn, make sure you're telling people what you're looking for, and being that voice to your own company is going to be solid, but then amplify it 100 times over when you're in a conference room and can say that as well. So there's my take on it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Again, Manifest, I don't know. As a trucking company, I don't know that I do it, but if you're looking for certain tech, that kind of stuff, customers, there are definitely some bigger shippers and players in that room. I don't know that they're necessarily the decision makers, depends on what their goal is. There's inventory, there's robots, there's things that they're looking at as well. Matt's 1 to 2 truck operation, obviously an amazing thing from a vendor supply standpoint, parts, automotive, that kind of stuff. And obviously just a lot of fun looking at the old school automobiles. Heading to Washington, D.C., I'd encourage everybody to at least be involved in their state's motor carrier associations, certainly investing some time and energy into what ATA puts out and data and information. I don't know that everybody has to jump to Washington, D.C., but certainly sending emails, telling people why it's important, because they're getting the stats. Again, they're getting the stats from the insurance people. They're getting the stats from these big data sources, which is great. But a lot of times, if we can plug the real world experience into it and sending that message, say, this is exactly how things affected me, is definitely worth the investment from that end. And then I'm a huge fan of Broker Carrier Summit. Those guys have done an amazing job. Dan Lindsay, Charles Gracie, Josh, Paul, Courtney, Rebecca, they've done a fantastic job of really focusing on getting people networked with the right people, intentionality behind it, and really being able to sell those connections and those deals. So I'm all for it. From that end, and that makes it worth it to me. So just kind of giving your lay of the land in terms of conferences and connections, just basically a follow-up from what sales is. And that's certainly a piece where going out and showing face and showing who you are, put some validity behind the name in an environment where we just don't seem to trust anybody in this industry. So I appreciate everybody being here. Again, we are packing up shop after this podcast airs. We are going to put this whole thing down and you will have a new background and a new look starting next episode. But I appreciate everybody tuning in. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.